Hi, beautiful ladies. Welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk to you about the incredibly tone-deaf video that TikToker Hannah Lee Yoder posted a couple days ago about her picking cotton. So I'm going to go ahead and just play a quick clip and then I will come back for a commentary.
Hi, my name is Hannah Lee and I'm a farmer. Come pick some cotton with me. Now, I know what you're thinking. What on earth is she picking cotton for? If you wanted me to be quirky, I'd say it's in my DNA. But the truth of the matter is, it's in my household. And as someone who loves a cotton stuffed mattress and a cotton stuffed pillow, and I'm getting low on both, I had to go harvest some cotton. But look at how gorgeous it is out here. You cannot tell me I wasn't born to pick cotton. Anyway, all jokes aside, I have actually come to love the cotton picking process. I love my little bulbs and I cannot wait for them to produce more cotton. Look how cute they are.
So in the clip that you just saw, Hannah was talking about how she likes to pick cotton because she likes to stuff her mattress and her pillows with cotton, which is totally fine. But then she just kept going and said how picking cotton is in her DNA. And then she said that, she likes the look and the feel of it and just the technique and just romanticizing cotton picking. Now, there is nothing inherently wrong with picking cotton. Cotton obviously serves a very important purpose in life. We need it for our clothes, we need it for our bedding, our pillows, whatever. Like, someone needs to do it. Some way or another, cotton needs to be harvested, okay? So there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I also want to say that there isn't one way to be a Black woman. There isn't one way to perform your Blackness, okay? Not everyone wants to be a boss babe. Not everyone wants to live a city life or be a city girl. Some people choose an alternate lifestyle, like living off of the land, living a slower paced life, living a more traditional life, and that is totally fine. The issue with this video in particular is the delivery and the word choice. Given the historical context and the controversies surrounding Black women and white male relationships. Now, most people know, but for those who don't, Black people during the slave era in the New World, so the United States and parts of the Caribbean, I'm not sure about Canada, but primarily in the United States, they were subjected to hours, sometimes 12 plus hours. That was a standard day of just being in a field picking cotton, to the point that their fingers would bleed, and to the point that they even faced a lot of violence from slave masters if they did not pick cotton fast enough. And so being a cotton picker, I mean, there was nothing easy about slavery. It was just a horrible practice and period in history, and it's still going on to this day. But chattel slavery, like picking cotton, was probably one of the worst tasks that you could be subjected to, because it was so demanding on your body and you didn't have a choice. There was definitely no such thing as workers' rights back then, because you weren't even seen as a human being. And so whether your body could manage it or not, if you were subjected to pick cotton in the fields, that's what you would do as a Black person. And there are people who would make jokes throughout history that was used. Cotton picking was weaponized against Black folks in more present times as a way to sort of demean and diminish Blackness, and kind of be like, haha, look at you, you're a descendant of slaves and your ancestors used to pick cotton, haha. People would weaponize that. So for Hannah, a woman of color, a Black woman, to make a comment like that is very, very, very alarming. But Hannah's behavior is a result of identity issues, because she clearly has not navigated every part of herself. And I sense that she feels like she cannot explore every part of herself. And so she's lashing out in order to receive the attention that she was deprived of as a child. Now, Hannah doesn't really talk much about her family outside of like her immediate family that her husband and her children. We don't know much about her childhood and her upbringing. So, from what I've gathered online, it looks like Hannah was raised Pentecostal, but she did marry into a Mennonite family. So, her husband was born and raised Mennonite. And at some point, she was a part of the Mennonite church. But there was like some issues with between the church and her family, and so her and her husband were pretty much cast out from the church, and they had to kind of just find another church to worship with and be a part of. And being excommunicated from the church is a common practice amongst Amish and Mennonite members if they sense that you are too modern and you're allowing too much of a modern influence to impact your life. They will excommunicate you because they fear that you are going to tarnish the rest of the church population and sort of influence them with your modernized ways. So Hannah spoke about the pain that she felt from that and being rejected from that community, and even being allowed to be a part of the Mennonite church as an outsider is a very tedious and long process from what I've heard, because you pretty much have to pledge allegiance to the church and not the religion per se. Mennonites apparently are a form of Christianity, but you're pledging allegiance to like the church, like the Mennonite ideologies and practices, and you pretty much promise to do away with everything else that is outside of Mennonite principles. So any contact with the modern world is pretty much frowned upon. And many Mennonite and Amish communities don't even have access to internet and TV because that is seen as a corrupt feature of the modern world. So you can imagine like how much Hannah had to diminish herself in order to fit in with that space and be accepted, and to then have that sort of stripped away from her and be told that, you know, you can no longer be a part of us must have been a traumatizing experience in and of itself. And also just being raised in a Pentecostal family, like I don't really know too much about her family. Again, she doesn't share that aspect, but whether her family was overly religious or not, being a regular member of a Pentecostal family, like where they're very charismatic and extreme in like the spiritual aspect of their faith, can be traumatizing or a lot to deal with in and of itself, because you are forced to conform to very, very strict principles and guidelines in order to prove that you are living a truly Christian lifestyle, if you will. So having to go from that extreme to the other and then being cut off and sort of having to navigate life on your own, it kind of gives you a sense of inadequacy and feeling like you don't belong anywhere. And the Mennonite church is also like predominantly white. And this doesn't apply to every single Mennonite, but a lot of white people sort of dismiss slavery and what happened sort of as a defense mechanism. Like, oh, you know, we're in present times, slavery happened so long ago, get over it. And while I do believe that, you know, I have spoken about Black people's mentality with slavery and how sometimes Black folks use that as a crutch to not progress and use that as an excuse to make bad choices. In this situation, it can be very daunting and overwhelming to have to constantly diminish a part of yourself. And sometimes, like, you won't even bring it up, but sometimes I'll find that, like, maybe like some white people don't have anything else to relate to, so they bring up slavery and they try to like they try to dismiss it like, oh, you know, look, we've moved on, so should you, type of thing. And so I'm not saying that's Hannah's situation, maybe it's not, but I sense that her making fun of cotton picking of all things, like she could have made a joke about any other aspect of her identity if she wanted to, really tells me that there is some unhealed trauma that she was a victim of, most likely at the hands of a white person that she was around. Maybe it was her in-laws, her husband is white, maybe it's the Mennonite church in general or some other random person, but Hannah had to be subjected to this, and she probably feels embarrassed because this aspect of her identity was made light of and was probably made fun of. And it's easy to be a target of this if you do not have a strong family foundation to validate you. If your family kind of just tells you, oh, just don't take offense to what people say, brush it under the rug, they didn't mean it. Especially a lot of Christians do this, where they'll dismiss other people's violence and say either forgive them or the devil is tricking you and trying to cause division and telling you that this person meant evil and they didn't, when actually they did. So she probably didn't get a lot of validation and affirmations from her family to tell her, you know, your identity is valid, our history is valid, you're beautiful, X, Y, and Z. And so it's very easy to be the victim and receiving end of this type of attack, if you will. And so this results in an inferiority complex due to a lack of validation, which then results in self-depreciating comments, or in this case, self-depreciating jokes about her heritage. Constantly making jokes during a serious moment or about a serious event is a defense mechanism that many people use when they're uncomfortable with the situation. And rather than them working through the issue to uncover and heal the trauma, they kind of just make jokes and make it seem like, oh, look, I'm not bothered, when actually you are bothered, and you probably cried when someone first confronted you in an aggressive manner and you weren't given the tools to deal with it. You weren't given the support to deal with it. And so now it's like, oh, look, I want to show you that I'm not offended. I want to show you that I forgive you for what you said or did to me. So I'm going to make jokes about it constantly instead of addressing why you feel the need to say and do things. And so it's like she's trying to take power of the situation by downplaying cotton picking. She could have honestly just posted a video educating people on the process, why she does it, because she's a farmer. She farms for a living, her and her husband. She could have done that. I'm sure people would have had a problem with it, but oh well, and she could have moved on. Like, this is an educational video, but the fact that she said things like, it's in my blood and blah, 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 people probably have made that comment towards her, and she never reconciled being on the receiving end of such a violent statement. This type of behavior is also common amongst women who aren't able to fulfill their dreams, and so they have to settle for another life that they were told or that they believe they want. So in Hannah's case, it looks as if she used to do modeling, or she desired to do modeling. I was able to find her modeling profile and some images from her earlier days. But maybe she was led to believe that, modeling is not an acceptable thing for a woman of God to be engaged in. None of her photos were provocative. And on her profile, she had made it clear that she wasn't willing to do mature content. So I don't know why some people think that modeling automatically means that you're going to do mature content, because you could even be a runway model and never do a topless photo shoot. The two are not mutually exclusive, but a lot of religious people have this mentality. A lot of ultra, ultra, ultra conservative people have this mentality that there's only one way to live as a woman of God. And so maybe Hannah tried to tap into her faith as a way to reconcile her identity. And so she let go of her desire and her dreams of modeling, just like with what the young lady did from Ballerina Farms, and is now trying to navigate a farm life and religious life that she thought that she believes that she wants. And maybe she does want this, but you'll never truly be happy if you have to give up one desire for another. And eventually you're going to start to resent that other thing that you had to defer to. And a lot of times it looks like lashing out and being an extremist. And that's what we see playing out in Hannah's behavior today. This behavior is also common amongst highly religious people, especially women. When you live a life that is very strict religious rules, and it's applied to women, many conform because faith is important to them, number one, which is totally fine. But they also want to comply as it affirms their identity. Many women do not know who they are outside of like religious dogma and outside of what the social aspect of their religion tells them that they should be. I'm not even talking about like what your faith tells you you should be. Like the word of God says, women ought to be this way, men ought to be this way. You should live a life that, is honest and you're not harming anyone, X, Y, and Z. The social aspect where the cultural impact on your identity begins to dictate how you should live your life. And a lot of times this comes from a very limited way of thinking and seeing life. And it comes from one way of living, one individual's life that they think is the best. And so they say, okay, I'm going to impose this on someone else. This is a great life that I live, like you should live it too, type of thing. And honestly, strict rules, especially religious rules, affect your mental health because it's hard to follow and can be conflicting with your desire to honor your internal desires that are outside of your religion. And so this is why you see like a lot of like violent, like a lot of people that do like violent crimes or like even terrorists, a lot of them, when you read up on their background, they have some sort of like fundamentalist background. Either they themselves like were raised in that or they themselves were practicing, but like they came from a very strict background, and it honestly like messes up the way that you see, the way that you perceive the world, and you take things from a very, very literal stance, and then it's like you're just stuck in this vortex of having to live out very strict guidelines that are not possible for any human being to attain, which is why in the Bible it says that you shouldn't focus on religious superstitions and you shouldn't focus on the religiosity of things, but your conduct should like focus on honoring God essentially. And so for women, they end up becoming bitter. A lot of religious women are bitter and mean, especially towards other women and especially towards women who resist what they're told their life should look like. So women who are like, you know what, I want to tap into my beauty. I want to honor that. I'm going to start putting effort into my hair. I'm going to put effort into my makeup, into my clothes. And they'll demonize these women because it's against like what they believe a woman should look like, and it's against what they practice for themselves. So trying to impose and project their personal views onto other people instead of acknowledging and accepting the fact that your religious walk, your spiritual walk is personal. Or some women, they do a complete 180 and they turn from their faith, or they're still religious, but like they kind of live their life on their own terms while still observing their faith. And for some people who are still in that way, like they think that, like, oh, no, 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 like, unless you follow these very, very strict and specific tenements of the faith, like you've turned away from God completely. And it can be something as simple as choosing to wear pants or saying like, I want to live in the city, I want to have a job, I want my kids to have access to good health care, so I'm leaving this community, I'm going to join a local church in that community. But yeah. And so that's why like a lot of Mennonites and Amish people have been excommunicated even though they still identify as Christian, because they don't want to live within the dictatorship of being Amish or Mennonite. You see this even with like Mariah Plath from like the Plath family on like TLC, I think it was. Like they weren't Mennonite or Amish, but like they were fundamentalist Christians. I don't know like what denomination, but like they weren't allowed to drink soda pop, like which I don't think is bad. Like that's poison. But like the girls had to like wear their hair super long. They had to wear skirts only. And Mariah was like, okay, well, I'm going to live life on my own terms. And like now, like she wears makeup, she styles her hair how she wants. She wears like short skirts and shorts. And she moved and like moved to the city and got a job. I think she also started to sing country music, and like that was like a big faux pas in her family and in the church. Or some women, if they simply don't have the courage, or they just simply don't know how to, they just can't make up in their mind that it's okay to deviate from the socialization of their faith and maybe still have your faith but like engage in like everyday things that are not even inherently bad. They kind of just dig deeper into fundamentalism as a way to like convince themselves that this is who they are and that this is a life that they want. You see this, and this is like what's happening with Hannah. Like she's digging in deep, not even so much in the religious aspects, but kind of like in the stereotypical maybe slave era. It's like it's almost like she's doing like slave like cosplay, like slave role play, honestly, as a way for her to kind of, as part of some trauma that she hasn't worked through. She obviously hasn't worked through her identity issues. She hasn't worked through being a black woman. Like she has often like spoken about again her issues with styling her hair, and now she said how her daughter has the same thing. And then when she asked her daughter like, why don't you like your hair, her daughter said, well, you don't like it, so why should I? And like obviously like little girls, they look to their mothers on their identity. And so it's like a cycle. Hannah's identity issue, just from what I've seen from her, also stems from her being a victim of bullying from other people, but especially black women. If you were raised in a community where you weren't raised around people who looked like you, and then you try to get around other women who look like you as a way to kind of build your identity. Maybe you look to them for advice on how to build your image, things like how to do your hair properly, how to dress, I don't know, style, things like that. That's common with women amongst you. It is very, very hurtful when those same women who are supposed to be a part of your sisterhood turns around and clowns you for something that you can't control, clowns you for being different, clowns you. Like we talk about all the time on this channel and other exotical channels, how we have been on the receiving end of bullying from black women, and oftentimes unambiguous black women, because we look different. So if we, who are probably in closer proximity to these women because, we grew up in the same society, we understand the same social cues and mores and how to navigate life. We may dress differently, but for the most part, like we've been socialized in like an urban setting, whereas she has been socialized in a more fundamentalist kind of detached setting. You can only imagine like the stark contrast and probably shock that she feels when women attack her. So I say all of this to say it is very important for you to know who you are. And I know that that's a very broad statement to make, because it's like, okay, how many people sit down and said and thought like, okay, who am I? What am I? That's a very complex and loaded question to ask. There are so many different characteristics and aspects of our personality and identity that makes us who we are. But that is why it's so important for you to be who you are unapologetically. And that means allowing yourself, first of all, to discover your likes and your dislikes. Okay. Maybe one day you would be into hip hop music, and maybe 5 years later you don't really like it as much anymore, and that's totally fine. Maybe right now you do not like sushi, but then 2 years later you start getting into Japanese cuisine and you start loving sushi. That is totally fine. When you live a very limited, static life, you are pretty much stifling your inner being and your essence, because like you're not allowing yourself to live and you're not allowing yourself to grow. Human beings, we are living things obviously, but we don't just live to live our lives to do like the day-to-day mundane, taking care of the house, taking care of the family, working, paying bills, maybe traveling, maybe going to an event, blah blah blah. Like our lives are so much more complex and deeply rooted than that, and you should allow yourself to be able to live. And a part of living is allowing yourself to grow through the ebbs and flows of life. And that means allowing yourself to discover new interests, but also allowing yourself to retire and do away with things that no longer serve you. Part of growth is pretty much the opposite of being static. It's allowing yourself to grow and discover new things. And honestly, this is a very, very childlike concept, allowing yourself to be in a childlike state. And I don't mean like being immature and naive. I mean allowing yourself to not lose a childlike wonder of discovering and trying new things. In my opinion, the people who are the most happiest and the most fulfilled in life are the people who allow themselves to tap into their childlike wonder. And so that also means going back to the things that you desired as a child. Maybe you were interested in ballet and you were told, no, 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 Black girls like you, they don't do ballet. Just stay home and focus on helping with your brother and sister. That's more important right now. Now that you're older, even if you're in a situation where your family, maybe you're in high school or even in university, and your family still dictates to you how you ought to live your life, you need to take ownership. And especially if you are an adult and you are autonomous, you pay your own bills, but also as a conscious being, if you're at a state in life where you're like, I no longer want to live my life doing the mundane status quo. I want to try new things. I desire new things. You are conscious and you have woken up to a new point in your life and you need to tap into that. So again, that means allowing yourself to tap back into your childlike desires. Maybe try, I don't know, maybe if you were into robotics as a child, maybe that was very intriguing to you. Or maybe you really like to be out in the garden with your grandmother. Go back and try gardening for yourself. Whatever that desire is, you know what it is that's deeply embedded. Take a moment and really sit down and write down those things and start to explore those things one by one. And you'll notice along the way that you'll start to discover who you truly are, the essence of who you are. You will be more confident because you're no longer trying to parrot someone else's life. And you'll notice that there's a youthful, happier essence to you because you are being who you were intended to be, and you are no longer trying to mimic something that you simply are not. And lastly, I encourage you to stay away from extremist ideologies. No human being was made to withstand extremes. You find life really in the balance and the median of things. Just like on a very simple level, we cannot withstand temperatures that are too hot, and we also cannot withstand temperatures that are too cold. The same is true with ideologies. It is not good for your mental health. Life is not black and white. There are a lot of nuances and complexities that you need to consider, and sometimes that is beyond our understanding. And you truly will find peace in just being okay with that, and also being okay with knowing that you're not going to always know everything, okay? But allowing yourself to be in control of what you actually can control and what you're responsible for. I truly wish Hannah all the best. I hope that she finds the answers that she's looking for with regards to her identity. And if you are someone who has a similar experience to Hannah, or maybe you don't see Hannah's behavior as a cry for help, well, you probably also need to take a look within yourself and do the inner work to sort out your identity issues. Okay, thank you so much for watching and for listening. Let me know how you have reconciled and healed your identity issues. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next video.